So I am in the midst of my second read-through of every single Wonder Woman issue ever. Yeah, I understand that I did my first complete read-through like less than a year ago, just don't worry about it, I'm going through something, let me sort this out. Now obviously I was more prepared this time, I'd already read the stories, I know roughly what was happening, and I still managed to be completely whacked in the face at the steep drop in quality when we go from Marston's writing to Kanigher's. Now, before Sergeant Rock's army hops into my comments or whatever, I am not saying that everything he wrote was without merit. I am saying that he was utterly the wrong writer for Wonder Woman, and that what he did with her and the story he wished to tell, in part because of his views, was pretty atrocious and directly contradicted the original purpose of Diana. And before people misunderstand me, I am not saying that Marston was some sort of paradigm of, like, perfect humanity. He was a messy, messy human being with some contradicting views and some wild attitudes towards gender essentialism. However, his writing had depth and nuance, and he seemed to understand that women are three-dimensional people in a way that I'm not certain Kanigher did, at least not when he was writing Wonder Woman. And it's especially wild because it's not just the actual comic itself that shows this. A lovely example is the sort of ride-along features that we got in Marston versus Kanigher's. Now in Marston we got short stories and comics about phenomenal historical women across the world, you know, trailblazers, women involved in science, women who were travellers, inventors. And then we would also get little stories, little short fiction stories, which were quite fascinating as well. Meanwhile, in Kanigher's, we get a whole bunch of stories about what marriage is like, largely often hinting at the fact that, you know, the man and the husband is the head. And then little sort of teen girls, oh haha, look at her, she's so in love, oh haha, she's mad at her man stories. Now don't get me wrong, Kanigher still acknowledges the fact that Diana is a woman, but she is elevated and promoted in a way which makes it very, very clear that she is not like these normal women folk. The wonder is more elevated than the woman part of her name. And we see this in a big way with how she is separated from the Holiday Girls. So the Holiday Girls start to show up an awful lot less in Silver Age, and when they do, they are there largely for Diana to save them. Etta is turned into like an even more two-dimensional character, and instead of being Diana's friend, the Holiday Girls start to feel more like her fan club. General Darnell basically stops showing up, like he's there every now and again, but he's no longer a consistent character, and I think that's in part because he was very uplifting and very supportive of Diana Prince. Like, he thought Wonder Woman was cool, but he saw the value and inherent wonder in Diana Prince as well. And then we have Steve Trevor. Now, I'm somebody who loves Steve Trevor an awful lot. I know an awful lot of people don't necessarily see his point, and in this run, I get what they're saying, but in Marston and in Rucker, Steve is fantastic. At his best, he is a man who shows the more positive parts of man's world. He is loyal, he is steadfast, and he believes in Diana above all else, but not in a way that feels like he's blindly following her. And we see in Perez's run that he can be that good, solid force in Diana's life, even if the two of them aren't romantically intertwined, although I actually don't dislike that relationship. However, Silver Age Steve, Kanigher's Steve in particular, is very, very fixated on making Diana his wife, to the point that he will try to trick her to get her to marry him. He does not necessarily have the faith and trust in her that even Golden Age Steve did. A lovely little example of this is such a small moment, but it drives the point home for me. Now, in Golden Age Wonder Woman, in Marston's Wonder Woman, there is a line where Steve is speaking to a gentleman on another planet, and the gentleman says, oh, here we equally split the housework and the farm work, so you'll have to learn how to, you know, look after the kids. And Steve goes, that suits me just fine, I already love to cook. The same exact man in Wonder Woman 128 makes an assumption that when him and Diana are married, that she will be the one to cook, and when she can't cook up to his standards, he makes a throwaway comment about, okay, essentially, well then, we'll starve. He also shows ire and anger towards her in a way he doesn't originally. It's also worth noting that Diana herself suffers from this. We see this through Kanigher's run, we also see this in O'Neil's run. Diana is presented as a flightier sort of woman, in the sense that she is very easily and very quickly swayed by several, you know, big other men coming into her life. And whilst I don't necessarily think that it's wrong for her to have other love interests, the way it's written is highly reductive and wholly focuses around her seeing some sort of appealing man and then immediately going like, yes, that man. Not directly related, but there's also this absolutely bonkers line in the O'Neil run which implies that Diana was only able to stay faithful to Steve Trevor because of her Amazonian powers, and if she didn't have them, she would have given in to her flights of feminine whatever and, you know, run off with some other man. I've already mentioned how Diana gets isolated in this by Kanigher trying to elevate her and show real women that, you know, there are things you can do to be good, but, you know, you're not Wonder Woman. Women have their certain place in the world, is that we don't get a Wonder family, right? Diana is presented as the sole Wonder character here, with the occasional from blonde Hippolyta, and Hippolyta all of a sudden becomes blonde in Silver Age Wonder Woman. I've never been able to figure that one out. But because Diana is elevated and lifted above the Amazons, who are no longer, you know, all equal to her in a lot of ways. Like, obviously she's always Wonder Woman, so she's slightly above the Amazons, but we no longer really see the feats of the Amazons outside of them occasionally sending spaceships out to face the alien monster of the week. And we also have lost Paula. Like, there are Amazon scientists, and we do briefly see them because they do have some pretty cool tech still, but we no longer have a Paula von Gunther character. And because Diana is isolated in the way she's elevated, at the same time when we were starting to see slightly more characters and starting to see families form, she gets isolated, right? So whilst we get stories about Wonder Tot and Wonder Girl, they're all just Diana. And I do think this has a knock-on effect today, with how the Wonder family is treated and the sort of lesser knowns. Like, if you were to ask your average person on the street, they would know Batman, they would know Robin, they would know Superman, they would know Supergirl. Certain people, a lot of people in fact, would probably not necessarily know that there has been one Wonder Girl, let alone 3. And obviously a lot of this was deliberate. As far as I can tell, Kanigher was anti-feminist. He thought that gender roles were sort of the way to be, and that women and men had their places. And whilst it is worth noting that Marston was also gender essentialist to a point, his gender essentialism felt an awful lot more like second wave feminism, whereas Kanigher's feels an awful lot like the reinforcement of standard heteropatriarchal family views. Now, that's not to say I never have fun when reading these stories. Monster of the Week is always going to hold a soft spot in my heart, and when these comics aren't being horrifically offensive, there is a fun writing style beneath it. However, sometimes you gotta get your shovel out and dig real deep.